So here is just a cheapo generic light bar. I believe this one's all amber. And I got it as a trade-in because it wasn't working. So there's not really too much to these, so I thought I'd take it apart and see if I could figure out what's going on with it. I have a lovely assistant right there. Hey, booty. Excuse the mess, I'm working on like 700 things at once here. So what I found is when I took it apart, these are really easy to take apart. You just pop off the two end covers. These lenses usually slide out, and then the top part will pop off. What I noticed, if you look closely on one of these boards, is there is two little dots there of a component that broke off. And this little thing was just floating around, bouncing around inside the case. And this thing, the only thing it really does is kind of reduce electrical noise from the vehicle's alternator or anything else that's going on. It just kind of filters out a little bit of that electrical pulsing, if you will. So in theory, if I jump those two contacts and try to turn it on, it should work if there's nothing else wrong with it. But I'm going to see if I can solder this thing back onto the board and get this thing going again. So let's do that. The first thing I'm going to do is there's just two Phillips screws that connect this board to the frame, and I am going to just remove the board so I have better access to work on it. Pop these lights out just for a second. Alright. It looks like they have some sort of little rubber washer thing under them. A little bit sticky there. It looks like there's also a zip tie here, which is holding all of the wiring really tightly in place. So I'm going to go ahead and carefully clip the zip tie without clipping any of the wires, just so I can pull this board out farther and have a little bit better access to it. So there, we can see that there was a connection here that this thing sat on, just like that. So hopefully, if we're careful, we can solder this thing back on and get this light bar going again. So this is a Milwaukee soldering gun. It's I like it a lot. It gives me lots of different angles. I normally just use it straight, but this thing heats up really well. Heats up pretty fast, and it does a good job, which is the important thing. So I'm going to do this in a way that hopefully you guys can see what I'm doing, but that'll just make it more difficult to do it. So I'm going to heat up this soldering gun. Yeah, see, only a few seconds, it's already hot enough to melt the solder. And if this thing was pre-tinned, that would help a tremendous amount with sticking it back on there. So I'm going to try to do that. Now if I can carefully do this, in a way that you guys can see it. Yep, and the fact that I can bend it down a little bit lower and it's not breaking off is definitely a good thing. So now that it's back on there, let's just apply power to this light and just see what happens. So this little box lets me set a specific amount of power, limit the voltage and the amperage. So these things are meant for 12 volts, so they run anywhere between like 10 to 15 volts. So we're just going to do about 13, and I have little gator clips that come off of it. So Here's the end of the cable. There's going to be one that's a black, that's going to be ground, and then the other ones are going to basically just be signal wires that command the bar to do different things. So connect the black to ground, and then we'll start using some of these signals. Still nothing. Oh, there we go, now we're getting somewhere. So that's that front section lit up there. What else do we got going on this board? Got a couple voltage regulators. Oh, now we're getting more. So one of them is going to be a signal change wire. So I got a majority of them working, a lot of fiddling with it. There's some stuff that just is plain out not working. So I've removed one of these LED strips from its housing, and I'm going to probe it and see if we're even getting power to it, what's supposed to be getting to it, all that good stuff, and kind of figure out where the problem lies. So hopefully you guys can see that. Is that better? No? I don't know. We'll find out. So I'm going to probe this, and we are getting a waveform pattern, so we are getting power out to the diode. So the board is working, the wiring's all there, everything else. We're just not getting light, or we're just not getting, the diode's not turning on. The diode's burnt out for whatever reason. So there's a number of those that are burnt out. I can probe each one and probably figure out what needs to happen, but my guess is the ones that are not turning on are just going to have bad diodes in them. So I can try to find diodes, but for a bar this cheap it's probably not even worth buying them for whatever the price is and then installing them, just because this bar itself is probably not even worth 50 bucks. So what I've done is I have the power and ground hooked up. I've changed the flash pattern to solid, and you can see that even some of these that are lighting up, the diodes are bad in them. They're not lighting up completely. And then we have a whole bunch over here that are just doing nothing. And a scraggler over here. What's nice about this board though is it's set up where every one is plugged into its corresponding location. I can kind of figure out where the wiring for everything is, but it being this cheap of a board and this cheap of a light bar, it's really not worth going through all the trouble to buy parts for it and fix it unless I'm going to be using it myself. And this one I'm just not. It's too cheap. It's not really anything that I would put on anything serious. So it's just going to be a parts bar. Well, for now I'm just going to put it back together. The control circuitry is still good. It's got a whole lot of options for outputs. There's about a 1 volt drop on output between what you got coming in to what's actually going to the lights, but it would still be good for building a custom bar and putting in some different LEDs and whatever. It's still got the, I think it's split front to back, or I gotta figure out exactly how the wiring is split, but it's got different patterns, and it's got a pattern change wire. I think it's this blue one, and then some other stuff going on. So still good usable parts, just not a good bar as a whole. So well, back into the parts pile it goes.